Let me tell you something. The slippery slope fallacy is not actually the use of points to say that things are sliding downhill. The slippery slope fallacy is actually when you disregard solid data points to say, no, that's not what it is. So let's talk about Neil Degrasse Tyson. I watched the 24-minute long segment with the debate about coercion, consent. There was no real science in there. He threw a bunch of buzzwords, cut the host off repeatedly, never allowed the host to actually finish a single thought through the entire interview. Kept saying, no, let me finish every time over top of the host. It started with informal fallacy, things like appeal to authority. There's a system in place. Okay, systems fail, right? What are we, whole thing with Black Lives Matter, systemic racism? Well, okay, but there's a system in place. Does that make it work? Does that make it better? I mean, they can't seem to be able to civilly figure out who wins what election anymore in certain states. But there's a system in place. The point of the meltdown was he completely just clutched, put the pedal down, removed all power from the wheels when it came to statistics, the scientific method, intellectual honesty, any of that. He threw all of that out with the bathwater and proceeded to attempt to convince the host of this show, I shit you not, what this amounted to was him attempting to convince the host of the show to get on board. Not to prove anything, and he kept saying, oh, no, this isn't a scientific thing. No, this isn't an actual debate. These aren't actual debate points. Well, no, it's not. You were attempting to sell this man, in which at the end of the thing, the guy said sometimes when it comes to a conversation or debate or anything of the like amongst experts, the best salesman is not always the best scientist. And he said this to Degrasse Tyson. And Mr. Big Brain Genius Physicist did not notice. What bothered me, though, was in his continual attempt to take anything the host was saying, which would have been, hey, I've got a statistic, let me ask. Well, let me tell you this instead. That's how it went. Well, hey, but what about, and he kept saying things like, but watch. It's like, bro, watch what? We're not looking at a screen. We're not hovering over a laptop computer to look at a video, right? Watch what? Watch that thing in your head, the hallucination in your mind that tells you it's logical, but when you try and actually look at it or read it, the bubble pops, there is no logic. It's called the glass bridge. Neil Degrasse Tyson moonwalked out into the middle of the glass bridge, and then when he did a little spin around, he lost track of what direction he was facing. The worst part was the last part, because he got into a continual attempt to say that it's not even, like he kept talking about the public safety and the social contract. Well, here's the problem. He said, which you have signed. No, I didn't. I have signed no such thing. None of us have. Signing a contract requires informed consent. Have you heard me speak about informed consent before? An unconscionable contract is a contract whereon one of the parties, or both, have signed it without proper informed consent. Or the contract's terms involve things which are unfair, illegal, or that's what the term unconscionable is. Somebody with a conscience wouldn't do this. We have not, any of us, signed anything. we verbally agree to try and get along as much as possible. And there are times when that collapses and fails. And I do not honestly believe anymore that a system of civil litigation is the solution to that. Now, what Mr. Degrasse Tyson was saying throughout was that for the public good, you do not necessarily have a choice. That it is more important to save the lives of the many than to consider the liberties of the few or the one. What disturbs me is his argument that, because the host said, well, okay, hold up though. I can't tell you you can or can't get an abortion. And I can only tell me if I can or can't get a shot. But you don't get to tell me that I have to take a shot. And he goes, well, nobody's telling you have to. He's like, yeah, but then you can't work. Well, I mean, yeah, there's that risk. He's like, it's okay, never mind that, to take a man's livelihood, his ability to earn a living in a world where hunting, capturing, gathering, or farming is not the common lifestyle. The average person is not going to be a self-sufficient survivalist. To take away their ability to earn money and participate in the system is tantamount, equivalent to attempting to take his life. You might as well try and kill him. So all of the people that were coerced into taking an experimental medical procedure, which is not as it was advertised, nor is it as it was claimed, nor is it what its name actually implies, until they altered the definition to make that okay, because that's normal. While trying to effectively sell the host of the show on the concept of this is the way to go, get on the right side, get on the winning team kind of thing. An abasement to science, because there was zero rationality. But where his logic stayed consistent was, it was consistently not your choice, and you don't have rights if it comes to a consensus of others determining that for the betterment of public good, if it so happens that your livelihood is taken away, then I guess you might lose your life. But so here's the thing. He suggests it would be mandatory to get a shot for public safety, that it's not your choice because you are endangering others. So you have to know that that line of reasoning bears 100% resemblance. There is no difference in that reasoning between that step and any further step, which would be for the public good, for the betterment of public health, whether it is an entire demographic or race that could be said to spread disease or could be accused of being naturally too violent, a threat to everyone, could be, it's okay for you to live and do your thing, but you are not allowed to reproduce. Forced sterilizations. Oh, you conceive? Well, we've decided that you don't get to have that kid. It's better for everyone. The next thing after that then, depending on how efficient they want to be, would be to devise situations in which you would simply just gather up all the people that are of this public threat demographic and either put them into labor camps, starve them out, or gas them and burn them. Genocide. If it's not eugenics, it's genocide. And this all starts with things like mandatory medical procedures. It all starts there. So what really came of that interview was that everyone got to see this supposed astrophysicist showing his obvious lack of expertise in the medical field. However, that any person with an IQ over 110 can easily handle reading these papers, looking at statistics, and if you have any mathematical ability whatsoever, whether you passed math, whether you ever took statistics, whether you've just fiddled with numbers and can understand graphs a little bit, you can see that what this host was talking about was everything he tried to bring up was based on actual statistics. And what this physicist did was he disregarded statistics while claiming statistics were on his side without providing citations. He argued in favor of every possible reason, as well as against any possible exceptions, only on one side, without any regard for other opinions and all other opinions. He said, hold on, but let me, but watch, look. And every time he would try to explain something, and he would lean in, I don't know how much he leaned in on the video. I was driving and listening to it, but it seemed like it was one of those, you lean in and you explain the thing with a few big words. Okay? Right? Asking the question. But the way he did it was in just slightly condescending way, that he was like, he thought the guy across from him was an idiot. And he himself was not using rational thought, was not keeping to the actual tenets of science, which is intellectual self-honesty when it comes to information. He abandoned everything about science in this interview, while maintaining that his status as a formally educated and certified doctor of astrophysics, PhD, is an expert in science enough to tell a non-scientist that anything they have to say about the scientific method is incorrect if he feels like it. And the reason for it, rather than citation or quote erat demonstrandum in the discussion, is to say, because science, because I am an expert, because I am a scientist, that is science. And at the same time, the guy says, but what you're saying is that only one group of scientists is allowed to be correct, is allowed to speak? Well, no. Okay, so why is it that, if anybody wants to talk about this, that if you have database things, and it always kept coming back to the government and the CDC and everything. It's like, when did we become so dependent on a system? Oh, there's a system. It's a prime example right there. The CDC has been wrong the entire time. They waited until after the pandemic was over to update their rules, guidelines, and documentation information to concord with reality, with the ground truth, with the extant science from before the pandemic. So, yeah, it was hideously embarrassing. As a remotely intellectual person that I am, I'm not saying I am the smartest by any means, but it offended me, it hurt my feelings, and it embarrassed me for him and his family. How poorly he performed in this conversation, because it was obvious from the start that he really didn't know anything but what he was told to believe, and as a scientist, failed in his due diligence, while maintaining that he was correct because ideology. He does not even, though, seem to realize that this has happened to him. That's the thing with a lot of this that you got to recognize with people, is most of them that are like that don't realize what has been done to them. And you can't tell them, because it won't do any good. All you can really do is guide them from the spot that they're at gently toward rationality, without having to interrupt or upset this thing that's been planted in their head that maybe eventually will wear itself out, but in the meantime they're going to be operating on false premises and incorrect ideas as if they were true, which could have logical inconsistencies later on as well, which would cause behavior problems. But at the same time, I do see people that, they kind of are on some level aware that something ain't right. They still go with what they go with. They still think and believe and listen and all the things, because that's what everybody's doing. But at the same time, they're like, you can see it. So, yeah, I'm going to link to the full-length interview that I just watched. And I suggest everybody else watch it too, and understand that this man who claims to be a scientist is not abiding by a single rule of the scientific method, of the philosophy of knowledge, of any of it. and to make claims that because one is an authority, one is therefore right, are what are called logical fallacies, specifically informal logical fallacies, where you use bad or no reasoning, disconnected points to say, see, here's the pattern, and it's like you omitted a lot of data to come to that conclusion kind of thing. Those are informal logical fallacies. And that's basically all he did, was be fallacious the whole time. So I'm going to cut it short here. I'm going to go get that link, and then I'll start this uploading, and this will either be up tonight or tomorrow.